Hi everyone, my name's Anne Van Loon. Welcome to Be Care. This is a course put together by Baptist Care SA's church support team, and it's to equip individual Christians, small groups and churches on how they can care for one another in ways that are compassionate, produce a sense of belonging and create well-being in the individuals and the community. The lesson today is how we can grow Be Care so that the caring grows and develops within our communities. The particular topic we're looking at today is how we can grow Be Care by adding a health focus to pastoral care. We'll be looking specifically at the benefits of adding a health focus to pastoral care, how it can broaden the scope, depth and breadth of your pastoral care so that it can become a real outreach ministry in your community. And we'll briefly look at the concept of diaconia in health and pastoral care. Now, if we look at this health and care continuum, which I developed to show you that the top line is primary, secondary and tertiary, and the bottom line is where the church fits within that particular focus. So if we look at primary health care, it focuses on preventing illness and disease and abuse and injury, and it focuses on promoting health, and you'll see in various community centres and health centres they do screening programs and community health programs and things that connect people together and look at whole family health. Now, where the church can fit into this aspect of the health and care continuum is through the health focus to pastoral care ministries. So things like Be Care, where we focus very much on how we can promote health and how we just not looking at physical health but looking at whole health, how we can promote health of the mind, health of the spirit, health of the body, health in the relationships to one another, the relationships to God and the relationships to the creation. So that's our point of difference that we add to the primary healthcare aspect of the continuum, and this can really be enhanced by pastoral care nurses, which we'll talk about later in this particular lesson. Then in the secondary aspect of the health and care continuum, you'll see that it relies on GPs and community care services, supportive care services in the community, things like recovery programs, disability care, the whole variety of different community care services, most of which are run via the not-for-profit sector and a mix of government work as well. But where the church fits in there is we have faith-based social services, faith-based recovery programs, faith-based group and home care programs, and community and disability care programs. So places like Baptist Care run those sorts of community care programs, and Lutheran Community Services and Catholic Centre Care. All of the various faith groups tend to have faith-based social services and recovery programs and community care programs. Then there's a slightly more acute aspect to secondary health care, and that's things like step-down facilities between hospitals and the community. So things like residential rehabilitation programs, outpatient programs, day treatment programs, nursing home or aged care related nursing homes, respite, those sorts of things. Now, we also know that the faith-based programs are running in the secondary area of the health and care continuum, and things like, we all know, church-based aged care programs, rehab programs like Teen Challenge, residential recovery like Teen Challenge, and rehab as varying physical forms of rehab, and residential recovery as programs like Teen Challenge run, and then various daycare activities. For example, Trinity Baptist in Colonel Light Gardens has a daycare for people who are older, and Hallett Cove have one for people in the community with disabilities, and there are a variety of different churches doing different things that are faith-based funded programs that help with recovery and care. Then at the tertiary end of the health and care continuum it's the acute hospitals, the Flinders Medical Centre, the Royal Adelaide, Lyell McEwen, Noarlunga, those tertiary hospitals, and some of the subacute hospitals in the regional areas. It's more crisis driven, so it's more when there's a need we fix it, curative type work. There's some day patient activity, and hospice activity would come into the tertiary level as well, so that people who are in the last stages of life can be cared for adequately. Now, the faith-based aspect to those is that we do have faith-based hospitals, not very many in South Australia anymore, but there's still the Calvary system that's there, and Memorial, and some of the smaller health services, and we certainly do have hospices like Mary Potter. Predominantly the Catholic system is still involved in acute healthcare. Most of the other churches have pulled out in this state out of health services. But you can see the church has a presence at every level of the health and care continuum. But the aspect that we're really concerned about is the primary prevention, how we can prevent people from moving into care services, and how we can, when they've been in those sorts of secondary care services, get them back into the community so they don't get sicker. So if we look at the illness-wellness continuum, which is, we visited this earlier in one of the other lessons, but just briefly to look at the treatment paradigm is there to prevent premature death, and it starts sort of the neutral point in the middle where you're just like maybe you and I going along through life without feeling anything. But as we get some signs and symptoms, we start to move towards sickness and disease, and then eventually death as we move to the treatment side. The focus of our health and care continuum is exactly that, treating and curing people as much as possible, and when cure is not possible, helping people to manage their symptoms so they have the best quality of life. Whereas a wellness paradigm looks at all those things right through from disability, signs and symptoms, and keeps trying to work people towards high-level wellness. And that's the aspect that we would be bringing in the church, a wellness paradigm. We're not about treating people as such. We're about keeping people as well as possible so that they maintain function in the community. And part of that is an awareness of how to prevent illness and disease. Part of it's about education on how to manage conditions and how to grow yourself personally and relationally. So we do things like prevention of domestic violence. We do things like understanding your various health conditions so that you can maintain wellness, looking at how we provide spiritual care, how we connect people into communities. All of those things will add to high-level wellness. So if we look at pastoral care traditionally, and we have already been through this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but pastoral care tends to wait for a problem to occur and then reacts and responds to it. So things like practical relief, direct assistance, bringing meals, providing counselling when things are going pear-shaped in relationships, self-help groups, some various different support activities like telephone care and home visits and that sort of thing. And we do some education on current issues and some community services. That's the pastoral care focus, very much reacting and responding to needs of our community in ways that people need for a period of time. But what we're saying when we add a health focus to pastoral care is that we are more proactive. So that more proactive process is about justice and stewardship. It's about making sure people get the things that they're entitled to in life and responding to need. So trying to prevent need so that we don't need to respond to it. So a lot of those activities are things like engagement with people, connecting activities, relationship building. It can be around the body, around fitness and movement. We find that, there's been a Baptist basketball community for many, many years, various different ways of fitness classes, Nutrition, perhaps we need to be serving more than coffee and cake at our cafes, but also focusing on helping people to lead nutritious, healthy lives. How we strengthen our faith life, how people can walk closer to one another and closer to God. That's really imperative to the whole health. Looking at developing various people's gifts and talents and their skills, you'll find that there's all the things we need in our churches are there, but often people don't even know that they have the gifts that they have. So discerning the gifts that people have and trying to foster those and nurture them into activity. Building their capacity, doing various activities that build community capacity, and looking at ways that we can give everyone an opportunity to participate and to serve. And it shouldn't be arm twisting, it should be working on where people's gift lies. And all of those things develop emotional and spiritual and physical resilience and develop communities. And they are so important. They're really important aspects to being salt and light in our community. So I really urge you to consider how you can add a health focus to your pastoral care. So it also pivots around the concept of diaconia, which is the Greek word used for service or ministry, relief and support. So traditionally pastoral care comes into the sort of diaconia, and if you have a look, that's just a screenshot from a Google search on diaconia, and you can see that the concept is still alive and well throughout the Christian church, and particularly in Europe. And in some denominations, the diaconia is very thriving, and they have health services and hospitals and all kinds of things that are still run by by churches and successfully. But what we are looking at is more service and care, both locally and internationally. That's a part of who we are. It's the call for us to respond, not to just sit back and watch. It's the Good Samaritan, if you will. Not to just walk by and let people be in their suffering and say, be well, but to actually get down and help them and respond in the way that we can. In Acts 6 verses 1 to 7, we see that the widows weren't being properly fed in Jerusalem at the time, and they were complaining, and part of their right was to be fed by the church community, and that wasn't happening. And so rather than taking pastors and the disciples away from the teaching and preaching of the word in the early church, they set aside 7 men and possibly other women later who did that work for them, the care, because it wasn't seen to be insignificant work. It was seen to be important work, but it needed to be balanced with the need to teach and preach and grow the church, as well as care for those in the church and those who are in need. And that's something that we need to consider again for today's church. How do we build those people and send out those people, choose the right people, send out the qualified people to go and care for others? And you can read in Timothy the qualities that we look for in that kind of person. So this is really a call for us to go back to that early church model of setting aside people to actually be in service and paid service to do that work. And we can see that deacons and deaconesses were there from the very beginning of the early church. We read about Phoebe of Kentria in Romans 16, and you can look through the historical books. You see Olympia was a deaconess in Constantinople and Fabiola in Rome. And in that final picture, you see that the deaconesses are still alive and well in various denominations of our churches, because this is part of the healing ministry of our church, and it's just as important as the preaching and teaching is. It's one of the 3 things Jesus came to do: preach, teach, and heal. And so we need to look at how we can actively engage with our communities in that ministry.